Back in January of 2019, creator of the Souls franchise and president of From Software, Hidetaka Miyazaki, said in an interview what his favorite bosses from Sekiro were. One was explicitly the Guardian Ape, a boss shown in a trailer for the game at the time, but the other was not named or seen yet. Miyazaki described them as using really dirty tricks, the real devious, real underhanded techniques. And when the game was released, we all took this as referring to Owl, the fight with Wolf's adopted father. Owl uses tons of trickery in his fights and even has a poison attack, and we all know how much Miyazaki indulges in his poison fetish. Along with his other fetishes for big doors, big swords, and big boys. Now it's important to note that there are two different fights with Owl, but Miyazaki is probably referring to the first fight with Owl, Great Shinobi Owl. The reason I think it's specifically Great Shinobi Owl and not his later form, Owl parentheses father. What? Anyway, the reason for that distinction isn't important. Just know that Great Shinobi Owl is far more underhanded in his tactics, likely due to, in the story, being changed and pushed down a path of greed and deception since his attack on the Harada estate. Hell, he literally starts the fight by trying to kill Wolf behind his back. Dick move, Dad! This is why I need a therapist! I've thought about this statement of love from Miyazaki a lot, as well as Owl's mechanics a lot, and while he wasn't my favorite fight, I think I finally realized why Great Shinobi Owl, and possibly also Owl Father, are loved by our Lord of the Soulsborne Kiro Ring franchise. And now that I've looked at it, I love him too. Owl is definitely a trickster and will do anything to win, no matter how cruel. And that is a part of FromSoft games that we actually don't see much anymore. He also represents the balance between yourself and your foe that combat has in Sekiro, the flow of how fights are supposed to work, and the ultimate form of an equal adversary. Owl in both his fights is symbolically important to Wolf as a character, as well as emblematic of the core design of fighting in Sekiro. And on top of that, he's made up of some of Miyazaki's favorite things as a game designer. Not just the swamp water. There's more than that. Remember back in Dark Souls 1 advertising where it went off about prepare to die and acted like it was super hardcore and hated the player? Well, it's incredibly inaccurate, but it was right in a way. They were trying to convey a core tenet of the game's world, but failed to get across what it actually was. Dark Souls doesn't want you to prepare to die, it wants your deaths to prepare you to live next time. Basically, the idea is you're presented with a trap or opponent that is supposed to kill you the first time you encounter it. It's a classic anime move where you introduce a bad guy and hype him up by letting him trash the main character, and it happens in other games too. Done right, it evokes an emotional reaction in the player, and a kind of vindication when they overcome the character next time they meet. The main gameplay loop of Dark Souls 1 and Demon Souls is absolutely littered with this. In Demon Souls, the Vanguard is supposed to kill you, so when you meet it later in the game, you destroy it and feel like a badass. Or if you do trash it first try, because you dumped 1,000 collective hours into Souls games before getting to play Demon Souls, you still get dunked on by the Dragon God, who also appears later in the game. This happens again, but faster in Dark Souls 1, where you meet the Asylum Demon, get destroyed, then grab your weapons instead and kill the mega-powered anime villain, and feel more powerful for doing so. And this isn't just about bosses. Take the ogres in Dark Souls 2, or the Outrider Knights in Dark Souls 3. Both enemies are meant to be incredibly hard for the early areas they're placed in, and will destroy starting characters if you're not careful. But they are surmountable challenges and offer substantial rewards if you beat them early. However, they also appear later in the game in order to show your progress. This mimics the way Black Knights of Dark Souls or Red Eye Knights of Demon Souls function, in teaching the player that they may not yet be ready for some challenges, but showing them how far they've come once they've reached the point of being ready. Oh right, did I say Mimic? Mimics! The lovely, notorious trap card that is actually Galaxy Brain game design and people don't give enough credit in almost every game, even non-Souls title they appear in. Yeah, Miyazaki loves mimics because they embody the method of teaching and rewarding the player that FromSoft games thrive off of. You will almost always die to your first mimic, and even some after. I still get caught out by mimics even after looking for the special chain or the breathing. And that's the point. You're meant to lose the mind game to these guys, to not only make you better at the mind game, but to show you that you aren't gonna get there first try every time. Miyazaki loves tricking the player, not for a laugh, but to teach them and make them just paranoid enough that they won't fall for the next trap. You might already see how this relates to Owl. Great Shinobi Owl is a fight full of underhanded tactics, dick moves, cheap tricks, and prepare to die teaching styles. You aren't supposed to dodge or deflect Owl jumping off your head first try. You're supposed to let it happen, get hit by his shuriken, and learn to not let it happen next time. You aren't supposed to see his smoke bomb coming, you're supposed to get blindsided by it, and learn to dodge away next time he uses it. You aren't supposed to dodge his healing prevention, or be unfazed by his firecrackers, or avoid his poison bathwater the first time he uses them. The entire fight is filled with harsh teaching moments for the player, where they have to recognize that they will have to change how they think to fight this guy. It's not only super cool that Owl's harsh and painful teaching of Wolf is reflected in his boss fight, but it's also a callback to the days where that's how Miyazaki taught you. And I say callback for a reason. There are a lot of good advances made in the game design of FromSoft games that have changed each subsequent game for the better. Dark Souls was better than Demon's Souls, Bloodborne was better than that, Sekiro even more so. Hell, Dark Souls 3 and even 2, despite being either deliberate rehashes or strangely different experiences, brought improvements to the table. But these improvements, unfortunately, took away from the harsh teaching style the old games had. Don't get me wrong, it's still there, but much more understated. Outside of Dark Souls, there's no mimic equivalent anymore. Hard enemies appearing early on, which appear in higher quantities later, are still here, but tend to be less difficult and sometimes are just mini-bosses or bosses you're meant to fight at the time, later demoted to normal enemy status. Getting trashed by a boss on your first attempt on purpose is almost entirely scrubbed out, and this isn't a bad thing. These sacrifices were made because it made the games better for not having them. Bloodborne had no mimics because it had men turn into beasts, filling the role of the surprise transformation instilling paranoia. Sekiro's mini-bosses becoming normal enemies is used to great effect, not to show the player how powerful they are, but to show the power of the Interior Ministry, when just one of their soldiers can take down a guy who took you tons of effort to kill. Even death in Sekiro has become more forgiving, literally giving you a respawn. The entire gimmick of the game diminishes the pain of being punished by traps that kill you. And that's okay! Father Gascoigne is an awesome fight that really starts to make you paranoid about your fellow man. Getting to see that the Interior Ministry can match your current power really drives home how scary the final act of Sekiro is, and how this really is the bitter burning end of Ashina. Dying twice is a fantastic mechanic, which creates wildly different strategies in combat and does give the player some leeway because, well, sometimes dying a ton and being severely punished for it gets old, even if you're learning your lesson. So I think Owl is loved by Miyazaki because it's a small moment in a game largely removed from the harsh teachings of the Souls games where he gets to use those tropes again. He recognizes that sometimes they aren't needed in a game, but still respects them and likes using them. He is the harsh teacher who, unlike Owl or Lady Butterfly, learned to actually let up when we were being overwhelmed, and we're better for it. But enough of that. Let's talk about sticking our sword in our dad's back. Sekiro's combat is wildly different from other games and from software up until this point. Miyazaki even admits that in the interview I mentioned. Oh no, 3 pages ago already. He talks about how old boss design really didn't work for the new fighting system, and it's true. Sekiro's combat pushes away from the tropes of Souls and a little away from Bloodborne. Let's talk about that actually. How is Sekiro actually different? Well, on a basic level, you've got your similarities. Wolf can attack, charge up to do a big attack that does more damage, block, dodge, and run. These are all things in the combat of the other games, but there's new stuff too, like deflecting. Seemingly a weaker form of parrying from Bloodborne, where there's a timing risk-reward between possibly taking damage or dealing out extra damage. And there's stealth combat, reflecting the semi-stealth in previous games, with walking slowly and backstabs, but it's far more fleshed out. However, the reason Sekiro is actually different from all these previous games is because of the posture mechanic. Not because it's a new thing, but because of the kind of combat it incentivizes. Previously, we had a stamina bar, which was really the precursor to posture, which refilled slowly and was used up by actions. Attacking, rolling, and blocking were all careful choices that had to be made. They all took from a limited pool of resources. This means that the game dictated the pace of fights. If an enemy attacked you, you had to respond by blocking or dodging, taking up precious stamina you could have used to attack instead. And when you run out, sucks to be you. Time to wait in a fit of frantic anxiety, hoping you get enough time to recover. Sekiro forgoes that mechanic in favor of its big brother, posture, which may seem similar at first, but incentivizes a completely different style of play. Posture is a bar that fills when blocking and being attacked, and will slowly go back down again at a speed dependent on your current health percentage, lower health being slower recovery. This seems like the same system, just inverting the visual for it in the UI and adding a few new things. But it's far more than that, because enemies have posture too, and when they lose it, they just straight up die. Broken posture is a free kill. Now, it's long been a mechanic in FromSoft games where enemies have the same stats you do. They have the obvious HP, but also hidden stamina just like you that limits their attacks, as well as hidden poise and other attributes like defenses against types of damage or status effects. These aren't shown to the player because, while they are there, they're not important to know to overcome a battle. You don't need to know how much stamina Vort has, because all you need to do is react to incoming attacks, not predict when the next one is coming. This changed a bit in Bloodborne, where reaction-based gameplay got mixed with an extra kind of predictive nature due to its parry mechanic, rewarding good timing and sometimes enemy moveset prediction with a ton of bonus damage. Now in Sekiro, this is beyond important. Battles are mind games, and the whole point of learning an enemy is to get in their head, as simple as it may be at times, to learn every way they might react and exploit it. And that can't be done without posture, or at least without seeing it. Because the reason Dark Souls didn't have predictive gameplay is that, well, it did. Predicting enemy AI is a big part of getting better at Souls games, and has always been a good skill to have, but it never really incentivized it. Souls games let players rely on a kind of passive gameplay where all they had to do was block right, or dodge when the swipe happened and wait for an opening. Once again, the game dictated the pace of the battles, and while they did improve this going forward, making dodge rolling more viable, making it more interesting, making enemy attacks harder to dodge properly without good spacing and movement as well as timing, shields didn't get fixed, but all of it still relied on a kind of gameplay where the player was at the mercy of the game. Even Bloodborne, which takes great strides to break from this mold, can still have battles controlled by the bosses instead of the player, though it's rarer than in Souls, where it was literally how every enemy worked. Posture, on the other hand, pressures you to keep attacking, to take moments of respite and turn them into moments where you're in control, and all its battle subsystems push you toward doing this more. Healing is easy, but not always needed, because with an extra death, you get more chances to be risky and take the offense. And of course, the most important part of staying on top in Sekiro's combat, deflection. Sekiro took the one mechanic in all of these games which allowed the player to change the pace of the fight themselves, parrying, and built the game around it. Deflecting is the way to avoid damage in this game. Yeah, dodging is still effective and definitely keeps its nuances from the previous designs, which is great, but it is still less reliable than deflection and is harder to master. And deflection isn't defensive, it also does something else. It increases your enemy's posture. This means the fights are more in the hands of players. Even when they're getting attacked, they have something they can do to push the fight forward. It's not just about being purely defensive anymore. In fact, being purely defensive is kinda bad in this game. Blocking all the time will get your posture broken, and you will sometimes be punished for it by enemies. They don't actually tend to capitalize. Anyway, constantly running away is also a valid strategy, but creates a battle of attrition that your enemy will likely win, because they have just as much, if not more, mobility than you. Sekiro combat is all about controlling the battle. If you're in control, you're winning. If your enemy's in control, well... This control is best highlighted in the fight against Genichiro. I'm sorry, I promise I'll get to Owl, just give me a moment. Genichiro in all his forms is supposed to be your main adversary throughout the game. He's Wolf's foil, both in narrative and in combat. Genny has access to a lot of the same things you do. He's a guy with a sword, and his bow serves a similar purpose to your shinobi prosthetic. Even when he gets all naked and starts throwing lightning at you, you already have the ability to toss it right back at him. You are equals, and this shows a ton when you're able to take control of a fight against him. If you know his moveset and how he thinks, Genichiro is a joke. He is a complete laughingstock. I learned this fight once. We all did. We all took a bunch of tries to kill him for our first time, and once that fight gets burned into our brains, each rematch is sadder and sadder as you realize how far he's fallen. Not just in the narrative due to his deterioration over his lust for power, but also just as a challenge for you. Genichiro by the end of the game is such a sad display that he's the mini-boss you fight before the real final boss. Because once you understand him, he's pitiful against you. This is precisely because he's an even match for you. He plays fair and has access to only the same stuff you do, though sometimes slightly less due to your more varied set of tools in your prosthetic. He's not a PvP battle where he'll learn you back and you'll mind game the hell out of each other until whoever galaxy brained their opponent to death wins. He's a stupid AI that fights fair and dies easy. Owl though? Owl is a dick. Owl is the worst. He hates you and will literally do anything to win. And that's what makes him the perfect balance of Sekiro's battle for control. See, if you take control of Genny, he won't take it back. But Owl? He will do anything in his power to take control of a fight. He'll pull underhanded tactics, blind, distract, poison you to get ahead. You and Wolf are clearly an even match for him, so he can't play fair if he wants to win. Owl is the PvP battle. He's the dick that comes in with dark sorceries and one-shots you. The guy who chugs Estus in a duel. He's Giant Dad, he's the meta, and you're supposed to beat him. Owl flips the dynamic between Wolf and his enemies on its head by being one of the only enemies that fights for total control of a battle. He won't let you breathe or recover. Getting a heal in is a terrifying moment. He will always be right on top of you, even when you run away. Miyazaki loves Owl, not just because Owl embodies the teaching styles of the old Souls games, but because he embodies the overwhelming, arduous challenge that those games give to the player. They give the player a cruel world with impossible odds, and say, go win. And then they root for you as you slowly learn how to. And when you actually do, they pat you on the back, tell you that you really did learn, and make you feel like you earned what it taught you. Owl is a terrible father, but Miyazaki is an excellent teacher.